Hi Sloths, and welcome back to Unpopular Opinions, the show on the internet where I tell you my unpopular opinions about things and stuff. Yeah, let's go with that one. Today I actually wanted to do something completely different where I actually interviewed a few of my friends and get their opinions on the subject. Unfortunately, that didn't turn out quite the way I wanted it to, so unfortunately it's just not going to be in this video. But that doesn't mean to say that I'm not going to do it in the future. Who knows? You'll just have to wait and see for a while. I will be doing that kind of video eventually, just not today. So I'm sorry about that. I wanted to get that out of the way first before a video, before we get into the whole meat and bones of the video. Today I actually wanted to talk about Generation 1 of Pokemon. So, as I'm sure you're aware, I recently finished my Let's Play on Pokemon Leaf Green, where I did a meta thing where basically at the end of every gym and the video after that I would switch to a different version of the game. And obviously I covered a ROM hack which basically makes Pokemon Blue into the original Pokemon Green but translated. So I played Pokemon Green, I played Pokemon Red, Blue and Yellow. That's Generation 1. That is Generation 1 of Pokemon. Well, I guess Green is technically like Generation 0, but anyway, doesn't matter. And I couldn't believe how easy the game was, okay? So, let's get into one of the things that people hate about this game. And that is the difficulty. People always say, the older games are harder. That's true. Older games are indeed supposed to be harder to play because of devs basically make them sometimes really hard to play for the sake of replayability. So they spend hours and hours and hours playing that one game, whilst they have time to work on other games, and it's, they have plenty of time to play, they have plenty of, exploration and stuff to do in those games, and yeah, it keeps the hours up. Whereas nowadays, you get games that are 30, 60 hour long, and people are beating them in a few days, whereas back then, you'd play probably about 30, 60, maybe even more hours of one game, and you still couldn't beat it. To be honest, I struggle to play older games. We all really do. That's why save states are such a big thing, especially in older games now. So when you get compilation releases of older games and collections and things like that, it often comes with the ability to save and load, especially certain states, instead of, actual checkpoints and things like that. But another thing is, obviously, back in those days, there's a lot of limitations which can make a game harder. Because there's less, they can't add in all these extra features to help the player because they don't have the ability, the knowledge, or the tools. Or the file size has to be way, way shorter. So, or just way lower, so you can't add extra things into it to help the player. Unfortunately, that's just how older games are. And I've seen a lot of people saying oh, this game's really hard, or it's too hard. And that's why eventually, with newer releases, after Gen 5, Pokemon games became extremely easy. Almost, well, it was practically hand-holding. So, that's a different topic anyway, for a different generation of Pokemon Unpopular video thing. So, yeah. That's one of the big things. TMs and HMs. People don't like the whole HMs being a thing, and eventually they did scrap HMs, and now it's just TMs. It was a good idea at the time, I'm sure, and it also added extra difficulty because you had to have, either you'd have to switch Pokemon constantly, between certain areas, so that you'd be able to use the HMs you needed in order to get through either secret areas or the main areas, or you'd have to have an entire Pokemon on your team basically at all times, and like an extra Pokemon to have some extra HMs just in case, that was like dedicated to being, the HM user. And that's where the term HM slave came into use, or was coined or whatever. And I remember HM slaves vividly, obviously because I'm from that sort of generation of, it's like, my first game obviously was a GameFreak game, so we still had, HMs and stuff like that back then. Whereas nowadays, as of, I think, is it I want to say Gen 6 or Gen 7, they got rid of, like, HMs properly. I can't remember. But yeah, HMs are never coming back. So people hated HMs, and still to this day, people are complaining that HMs are gone, but at the same time, they're complaining that HMs were a terrible thing. So, I don't know. I genuinely just don't know. People in the Pokemon community just make no sense sometimes. The next thing is, obviously, the sprites. Okay, I'm going to be real with you. The sprites in Generation 1 were... most of them was absolutely terrible. I mean, have you seen Golbat? Have you seen Golbat? And in Pokemon Green, what I've noticed is the entire Bulbasaur family, or Bulbasaur line, whatever you want to call it, just has these really awkward sprites, and I just don't like them. They're a lot better in, like, the newer releases, well, not the newer releases, but the re-releases, Pokemon Red, and, the re-release of the North American and European release of Pokemon Blue, which was originally supposed to be Pokemon Green, but then they had to scrap that and blah 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 blah. Anyway, I'm sure you already know the stories. If you're watching this video, you probably already know the whole story between Pokemon Green and Pokemon Blue, so let's not get into that. Yes, the sprites were terrible, they were fixed later, so yeah. But again, it was like 1996, 1997, and it was the Game Boy, and they tried to make it as interesting, as unique, and as high quality, for lack of a better phrase, as they possibly could. And honestly, it's not that bad. For what they did back in the day, it was like revolutionary, almost, especially on the Game Boy. But these days, especially if you're playing, widescreen or on an emulator or anything like that, if you're not playing it on the original hardware, these Pokemon sprites would look, or still do look, absolutely horrendous. It doesn't help that they're being stretched out and things like that these days. But oh well, back then this was great. Right now, not so much. It's a case of how does it hold up today. Because back then, people loved the difficulty, people loved the sprites, the look of the game. They also loved the fact that this is like a bit of a positive thing here instead of a negative thing. But what they actually did was, in the Game Boy Color, they re-released the games so that the games would actually like have a specific colour when you played them on the Game Boy Color. So that's really cool. So for Pokemon Red, obviously the screen was like red and stuff like that. All the sprites was like a reddish. Everything had like a reddish tinge to it. And obviously the Pokemon themselves would actually have colour to the sprites now. So it distinguished them a lot better. Especially with certain sprites where you couldn't really tell like where things started and where things ended, because it was mainly just, it was monochrome, it was grayscale, it was black and white, so it was really hard to distinguish back then. But obviously once it got moved over to the Game Boy Color, you could tell what things were a lot better. And obviously, like I mentioned before, Pokemon Blue on Game Boy Color had bluish tinges to most things, so it was really, really cool to see. Now, another thing that people hate about Generation 1, storage. I absolutely hate the storage in Generation 1 also. I can absolutely agree with you right there. But then again, this was 1997, this was a Game Boy title, they couldn't add much storage. Nowadays, the storage is basically unlimited, I think. But still, it was absolutely really frustrating. Absolutely hated the storage in those games. I still do, and I always will. But the one thing you've got to remember is there's also a PC storage. You can just chuck stuff in there, it'll be fine. That has like a bigger amount of storage capacity. I don't know how much. I don't even know. I'm pretty sure it's not like, what's it called? Infinite. That's the word I was looking for there. I'm pretty sure the PC storage is not infinite at all. For like item storage in the PC. And the whole boxes as well, the PC storage boxes for Pokemon, they are really annoying, really frustrating because they don't show you like what Pokemon you've got in there, like sprites and stuff like that. So it's really difficult if you end up nicknaming a Pokemon and then all of a sudden you're trying to find a specific Pokemon that you've nicknamed in your PC, but you can't find it because you don't know which Pokemon it is, because you can't see which Pokemon it is. Obviously that was fixed in later games, so you could actually see a sprite of what the Pokemon is, and there's also just not much of storage space in there. Again, fixed in later generations. So I can absolutely agree and understand with so many complaints about the original games. But what you gotta think of is, back then, this was the absolute shit. This was a masterpiece, and still is to this day. It's held up in such high regard for being like, this is where this amazing franchise started, and everyone wants to go back to it purely because of nostalgia and the fact that, you know, this is where it started. Let's see how far it has come since then. But then again, everyone always says, oh, this game's terrible, it's nothing like the newer games. Oh, where's all the 3D models at? Why are the sprites so terrible? It's like, seriously, just calm down, play the game. And the music, okay? In fact, no, let's not talk about the music just yet, because I've not finished all the complaints. There's like one major complaint left. Two, actually. One is physical and special moves, and obviously physical and special defense. Those were like a very awkward thing. For those who don't know, basically, in Generation 1, physical and special moves were, like, it was completely wrong. It was done the wrong way. And I think there's even some moves that basically just straight up don't work. Like, I think Whirlwind basically just doesn't work at all, especially in battle. Well, obviously in battle, but in battle against a trainer, it just does not work. At least that's from memory. As far as I'm aware, it just doesn't work. And I know there's also some text and little issues in the game where it says certain things, but it does slightly different things, or it's potentially a little bit misleading or something like that. And it's just like, how are you so picky about? I mean, I would be picky about these things today, but not back then, because back then they didn't really have like the best translators or the best localizers and things like that. I can absolutely 100% say that they're just not at fault. They're not at fault back then. But by today's standards, you have amazing localizers, you have amazing translators, and then people are still getting things completely wrong. I can perfectly understand if it's like one or two little mistakes here and there in a game. Especially in an indie game where people don't have the ability to, you know, hire like people to proofread or to go through and do like beta testing or whatever it's called, and they can't afford like proper localizers and things like that. So I can absolutely agree and understand their situation. But if you're really going to get arsey about like early, like the late 90s on a Game Boy sort of localization stuff, just shut up. Calm down and play the game. Okay? And then obviously the physical and special split, it was also fixed in straight up the next games, so that's great. In Gen 2, they fixed it, so that's fine. Now the final complaint that I see about this game, all of this generation, all the time, is it's a glitchy mess. Oh hell yes it is! But for some reason that's part of its charms. Nowadays people will be like, if a game has like terrible glitches that no one likes, people are always like, like, think about Cyberpunk 2077 when that first came out. People were absolutely shitting on this game and the developers. Sure, that they absolutely deserve it, but if you think about it, if people now go back and play like the original Pokemon games, like Generation 1, and they encounter a glitch, they'll be like, oh neat, that's kind of a cool glitch. And they still think that today, like the whole, what's it called? The missing number glitch, for instance. People absolutely adore that glitch. Or Glitch City. They adore these glitches. But they don't get arsey about it either. I mean, if a Glitch City was to exist in a modern Pokemon game, people would get really arsey about that. They'll be like, oh, look at this, look how terrible it is. Or look at, like, this missing number, oh, it just destroyed my save file, I didn't even know what to do about it. But back then, people was like, oh, look at this, it's so cool, I got this strange Pokemon and it destroyed my entire game, and now I've got to buy a new one, ho, rad. That's what it was basically like back then. People obviously would have been like really sad and stuff at the same time, but you also get those people who go around the playground and will be spreading rumours about, oh, look at this spooky special Pokemon that I caught and it destroys your game. And then other people will be like, oh cool, yeah, let's try that all out together, and everyone would be like trying to find out how exactly to get it, and they'd be spreading more rumours, and that's what it was like back then. I mean, I wasn't around back then, sort of, probably, but at the same time, if that were to happen today, people would just no, people would not like it. But people of today like the older glitches in older games, but hate the same sort of glitches in newer games. It baffles my mind sometimes. So let's get into a reason, all the reasons, or whatever, as to why Generation 1 is absolutely incredible. First off, I want to say the story. Okay, people have always complained about the story. Like, oh, it's so simple and boring. All you have to do is go through these trainers, like these 8 gym leaders, catch a bunch of Pokemon, train them up, and then, oh, spooky, scary Team Rocket shows up, and then you got this rival who's a dickhead, and he has to, you have to beat him in the end. Yeah, that's basically the entire game, but back then this was the pinnacle of storytelling. This was a grand JRPG, and it still is. This formula, to this day, is still practically the exact formula that's still being used by GameFreak and by Nintendo. It's still the same story, told in slightly different ways, basically. But people actually like the story. People like the slightly different ways that they can tell the exact same thing. It's cool to see that they actually have this grand scheme of creativity, and then they just, swap things out and add new things to it, and it's always a slightly different story. Like in Gen 1, you got Team Rocket, the bad guys were trying to, clone Mew and get Mewtwo back after it escaped. Okay, that's fine, that's cool. And the whole gym leaders, yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Gen 2, Team Rocket's lost its leader, and they're trying to come back in a big way, and they're trying to take over Johto this time. They defeat him, and, it's the same sort of thing with the whole gym leaders. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. It's a sequel story. Absolutely perfectly fine. But then you've got Gen 3, Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and then Emerald as well. You've got a story about an evil team once again. You've also got the story of, like, the main chunk of the story, which is, you know, the whole gym leaders and stuff like that, and Elite Four and the champion. Yeah, that's what you want to be. That's what you want to do. You want to be the champion of an entire region. You can also be like a contest champion as well. But the great thing is, it's got a new evil team. And it's not Team Rocket, it's 2 teams, in fact, which is even better than 1. And those 2 teams are actually at odds against each other. How cool is that? 2 evil teams that are actually fighting each other, but are also fighting you at the same time. Both of them have got terrible plans, and you've got to defeat both of them. So it's like twice the chaos. Obviously, one of them wants to destroy the world and then create loads of more landscape stuff, because they think that that's how the world is supposed to be. Then you've got the other guys who just want everything to be underwater. I hate Team Aqua. Sorry about that. I don't like underwater. No, let's not do that. And then Gen 4, obviously, you've got the whole religion side of things as well. Gen 5, you've got... It's basically just politics and cults, basically. It's like a cultist and politician at the same time. Gen 5 also has has a sequel to it as well, Black and White 2, which is basically the same thing, except from it's got an actual different story with a rival. The rival actually has a story. Who knew? In all these years, has the rival ever actually had much of a story? I mean, not really. Gen 1 had, you know, your rival's a dickhead and he wants to prove that he's the best because he's actually the son of a former champion and the greatest scientist in the entire region. Gen 2, it's basically proven that Silver is supposed to be like Giovanni's son. That's probably still like a theory, but it's like pretty much confirmed at this point. I don't care. And he's trying to find his own dad, so that's cool. Yeah, but it's not harped on as much as it is in future generations. So what I'm trying to say in this is, the story may be the same, but the fact that we can just swap things out and change it on a dime is brilliant. It's a really good formula. I've got to agree, it's really good. So, what else? What else is great about this game? What other nostalgic things are we thinking of? Music. The music in this game is absolutely amazing. Junichi Masuda, the composer for the game, he's been composing the game since then. He still composes music for the games now. Now he also does things alongside like Toby Fox as well. Toby Fox does a few tracks. The guy who made Undertale and I think, what is it called, Deltarune? I haven't played Deltarune. I don't think it's even fully out yet. I think it's like releasing in chapters. Anyway, that's a side note. Let's get back on track. The music in this game is amazing. And everywhere fits so well with the music. Of course, it might be a little bit ear-piercing because it's chiptune and, you know, it's like high-pitched music as well anyway. So it can hurt people's ears sometimes, and it can cause, you know, people to feel a little bit uncomfortable. People don't like older music and things like that, or they're just straight up like, ooh, this music's not very good, I prefer, you know, smoother sounds. That's perfectly all well and good, but you've got to think that, I mean, surely you've got to believe that the music from those games, the way they were composed, the thought that went into it, and the fact that it all fits really well, you've just got to believe that it's a good thing, right? Is everyone with me? The music in the game is phenomenal. Even like the remakes have the same music and in like an updated style, and it still sounds so nostalgic. To this day, it is like a huge nostalgia thing. Now, people are going to complain about the whole nostalgia versus realism thing. It's like, oh, back then it was perfect, it was great, and nowadays it's more like, you know, looking back on it, maybe it's not so good, but you've got to think, nostalgia doesn't even play a role sometimes. Sometimes music is just good because it's just good. Like, I would listen to this music walking. I mean, I have done before. I have playlists of, like, old music, like, for walking. Pokemon music especially is really, really good for, like, walking or hiking and things like that. And it's also got so many songs that are, like, really, forgive the term, feel good. Like, feel good songs. They're, like, it's really upbeat and it's happy and it's just, oh, I love it. I love the music in the Pokemon games. Up until, like, Gen 7 just doesn't have many memorable tracks to me. Gen 6 also doesn't really have many memorable tracks to me, to be honest. So yeah, what else is great about the first generation of Pokemon? Does it still hold up today? What's the legacy like? The legacy is brilliant. So, the fact that this one sort of blob of games, this first generation, created such a massive hit that it's now one of the biggest global franchises of all time. Like, I don't know where it is on the list of, like, multi-billion-dollar franchises or multi-pound or multi-yen dollar billion franchise things. I don't know. I don't know. I can't get my words out. I don't know where it is on that list. But I know it is one of the highest grossing media franchises of all time. And that is stunning to think that a game like this, that people are now calling, you know, nowhere near as good as, you know, the newer games and things like that. Like, people always hark on, like, Gen 5 and things like that for being, like, the worst games in the series. But people now are looking back and saying, oh, you know what? Look at all those sprites in Gen 1. Yeah, that game is, like, the worst now. Look at how the storage system works. Oh, it's so rubbish. Oh no, we're not playing that crap. That's basically what people are starting to do now, and I don't like it. People need to understand the difference between nostalgia and realism. Because what I'm trying to say is, back then, sure, this was like the shit. And now, looking back on it, maybe it's not the shit. But people are always thinking like, oh, just because you like it, that automatically means you only like it because of nostalgia. Whereas people probably can look at it objectively, like I do, sometimes. Okay, I do have a bit of a bias. I am a little bit nostalgic for this thing because I played like... Obviously, I played like Gen 3 first, and then I played like Gen 4, and then I think I played Gen 1 straight after that, so I was still pretty young back then. So I am a little bit nostalgic for this thing because it's kind of like a bit of my childhood. And I do have a bit of bias. But I am also able to look at it objectively and say, this is what's good with it, this is what's bad with it. Does it still hold up today? Not quite as much as you think. But you know what? It's still a good game. And back then, it was also, you know, like the pinnacle. This was what it was back then. This is what it is now. Completely outside of nostalgia, looking at it objectively, it's still a good game. They're still good games. They still work really well. They still play really well. And it's still really fun to play. At least for me anyway. I mean, you might not like JRPGs. You might not like turn-based combat. But if you are someone who likes that sort of thing, you can go back to that game any point in time and you'll be like, you know what, this might not be as good as, you know, say like Gen 4, but you know what, it's still pretty good, and I'm glad I got back to like the original. I'm glad I got to see what it first started out as. That's what I'm trying to say. That was like a complete and utter ramble. Everything is off script. I don't have scripts in these videos. I don't know what I'm talking about half the time because I'm just saying everything that comes off of the top of my head. But yeah. So, the last thing I want to talk about real quick is... Actually, what do I want to talk about? What was the last thing? Crap, I forgot. We've gone through music, we've gone through nostalgia. I've already said my last topic. I've already said my last piece on the topic. Oh, I'm already... It's like, I'm why am I forgetting so much? Damn it. Okay. So... My final thoughts on the subject. Is it a good game? Yes. Does it still hold up well? Sort of, yes. What's my opinion of it? It's just a good game, play it. All those people out there who are hating just because of, nostalgia. Just go away. Play the game, try it. Try the games. If you can, try the games. See where Pokemon started. See how it got so big. Just try it. Anyway, if you can hear like any background sound, it's because I have dogs. And they're like moving around and stuff. I think I woke them up. Poor doggies. Anyway, okay, can my model please stop? Okay. I'm sorry for the whole ramble thing. I always seem to do that. Oh well. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. Please like and subscribe, it's always free, and I'll see you later.